In this video, we're going to look at the offence of robbery. The offence of robbery is quite simple. It's outlined in Section 8 of the Theft Act of 1968. Now, subsection 1 tells us a person is guilty of robbery if he steals, and immediately before or at the time of doing so, and in order to do so, he uses force on any person or puts or seeks to put any person in fear of being then and there subjected to force. So what we do is outline all of those issues. We split them apart to understand what robbery is. So we've got steals, it's theft, and then we look at others in terms of force. Subsection 2, a person is guilty of robbery or an assault with intent to rob shall on conviction on indictment be liable to imprisonment for life. So maximum of life in prison. So the offence of robbery needs to be structured in a particular way. So we have, first of all, the actus reus of theft. We then need to deal with the force element. We then, in a new paragraph, need to deal with the mens rea of theft element. And finally, the intention to use force to steal. So we have two actus reus paragraphs, two mens rea paragraphs. A lot of the analysis is to be within those paragraphs, or at least sections of your work. So you can see the video on theft for a more accurate description of what you do for the actus reus of theft. But ultimately, we need to deal with the three issues from section 3, 4 and 5. So we need to prove there was an appropriation, it was property and it belongs to another. The cases change, you can add these cases in. We have Robinson, Corcoran, Anderton and Zerai. In the second section, we need to consider force. So this is new, you might have already done theft, you're adding this element to it. So we need to look at what force is and what can amount to force, and how much force is necessary. It needs to be used immediately before or at the time of stealing. Remember that contemporaneity rule for this too. Force can be used on any person, it doesn't need to be the person who is the victim of the theft. And of course, force must be used in order to steal. Now that just means it can't be, for example, a separate assault and battery and then a theft afterwards if it's opportunistic. So look to the key case of Dawson and James, Clouden, Hale, Lockley and James to establish these rules. In the third section of work, you need to be looking at the mens rea of theft. Now, the video on theft is also on TikTok and YouTube. You can look to that, but you can look at dishonesty and intention to permanently deprive. Those issues are still necessary, so they need to be proven in this third section of your work, and you can add the case of Robinson to demonstrate this. And the final body of your work, or final part of the body of your work, is intention to use force to steal. So once you've established the intended theft by using the mens rea of theft, we need to prove that they had a direct intention or oblique intention to use force in order to steal, and that is essential. And of course, key cases there are Mohan, Nedrick and Raphael. So to apply robbery then, we need to just delve a little bit deeper. We of course, for the first section in actus reus of theft, we need to be mentioning, was there an appropriation? Make sure you talk about the rights of the owner and what have been assumed. You need to establish what type of property the item was and whether it belonged to someone else. To apply the second section, we need to be looking at force. So was it force or was it threat of force? Both are applicable. Make sure we explain what that is and why it would satisfy this element. Was a violence or force used immediately before or at the time of theft? If it was slightly afterwards, make sure you compare the case to Hale. Was the force used on the victim or another person? Explain that it doesn't really matter who it was used as long as it was used. And of course, was the force actually used to steal? Explain how in your scenario that force was used in order to steal and that was its main purpose. And as I say, it wasn't just opportunistic theft after an assault. So by the third section, we need to look at the mens rea of theft and of course use the case of Barton and Booth to establish if dishonest, and the idea of intention to permanently deprive needs also to be proven. But did they intend to keep the item? The final element, intent to use force to steal. Did the defendant have the mens rea for any of the non-fatal offence? Now, this is your starting point. For example, if they use threat of force, then they've probably got intention for assault. If they use force, they've probably got intention for battery, or maybe even intention to cause some harm. But we need to make sure there's a starting point as an idea. So intention to use force, what kind of force, did they mean to use it? And of course, was it used to steal? Pick about the scenario, pick it apart, and tell the examiner exactly why the force was used to steal. Again, support with case laws outlined previously in the video. And of course, don't forget to conclude. We need to make sure that we discuss the outcome. Are they going to be guilty, not guilty? Of what offence? And what possible sentence might this person receive if a jury was to find them guilty?